Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That's Robert over there preening.
My collar was messed up. It was driving me crazy.
And I'm Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. And today we are continuing our discussion about effective hiring and creating dynamic teams. And so this is part two. I will own, I was probably a little wordy last week, and we ended up having, it turned out to be a good conversation, but the original plan had not been for two parts, but you got two parts, so there you go. And so we're going to continue our discussion about effective effective hiring. And last week we got into a discussion about effective interviewing and cultural fit. And what else did we discuss last week? Right, the importance of thinking and hiring for potential, not skill. Right, not just skill. That it should be. It's a package deal. It's a package deal, and so we are going to continue that discussion. And today we're going to dive in to talking about assessments and the role that assessments can play in helping you make great decisions. And Robert is certified in at least one assessment, right?
Yeah.
Probably competent in some others, but certainly certified. I have a certification in one, although I haven't used it in a while. Um, might have to go back and get recertified. So, and then there's some other ones, and we're not here advocating any assessments in particular, not trying to sell you anything, just the importance of the assessment. So, for getting us started, any opening thoughts before we jump into the topic?
Yeah. I don't think you were worried. I think you were ambitious. So I want to reframe that.
Thank you.
You were
Thank
ambitious.
you.
You
You're
weren't
so
worried.
kind.
You're welcome. No, I mean, I think assessments are great. I think, I really like the assessment. I do the Energy Leadership Index assessment. I really like that assessment for individuals and teams and groups. But I think what's important to realize about assessments is they are not the end all be all. They're an add on to everything else. So you should be really having a good foundation for hiring and recruiting and all of that stuff. And then in my opinion, use the assessment as something that enhances what that person already brings to the table. I think that's really important.
Exactly. And I want to stress that there are a wide variety of assessments. There are ones like the Energy Leadership Index that you're certified in, the Predictive Index that I'm certified in. There's Myers-Briggs, there's DISC. There are a whole host of assessments that you can use, but there are assessments that you can create that help you test certain skills and the kinds of things that are important for your employees to be able to do. You can create assessments around those, right? So writing samples are assessments, and doing work samples, which I think are things that are have come into some popular usage in recent years. You need to be careful about using some types of work samples or work products where you're testing people to see if they can actually do the type of work you're looking to do. This tends to be pretty popular in software development and graphic designs and things like that, where you want to see that the person actually can do the work under real circumstances. but and I'm not going to get too deep into this, but there's some legal things that can come along with that, where you are actually having people do work that you turn around and use. So you want to be careful if you're in any of those fields, or that's the kind of thing that you are looking to use to assess where people are in their skill set. You want to be really careful about that. But there are certainly assessments that you can do tests for things like Excel, writing samples. I used to, as part of the process that we use at a former employer, there would be a writing test and an assessment, right? That we use, as you said earlier, as one of the tools that we use to make a decision on whether or not to move someone through the process. And sometimes it was that writing sample that made the difference between two candidates that were equally qualified, that we all thought would fit well, and one was a better writer than the other because the job they were going to do was writing intensive. And so being able to analyze the material that we were working on, and then being able to cogently, concisely, and relatively quickly, do the analysis and evaluation that needed to happen, and then write something, was a good indication of whether or not they were going to be able to do the job and do it under pressure. It's one thing for someone to submit a writing sample, it's a whole other thing for them to do it in real time. And so, again, depending on what it is that is important to you that this person can do on the job, you can create all kinds of assessments. So, the skills assessments, in addition to things like work styles, communication styles, leadership styles, etc.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, and like we both have mentioned, it's just you want to make sure that what you're doing or the assessment that you use is going to enhance the job that employee is doing, and you have to take some things into consideration. You have to look at legal things. You were mentioning that you don't want to do something that's illegal. You certainly don't want to take somebody's intellectual property, like you were saying. So you really want to just really give it a really, just think about it really thoroughly before you decide whether or not you want to include an assessment as part of your onboarding.
The other thing I would like to mention that I think is really important is giving candidates the foreknowledge, that assessment, and what the general nature of the assessment is ahead of springing it on them. And while there might be some, I don't know, something that you get out of surprising them with it, I, I'm I'm I just come from a place where I think the transparency of the process is a better approach. So we talked last week about letting them know the interview process, how many interviews you are going to have, what types. Are they one-on-ones? Are they panel interviews? How many there were going to be? How, after the phone, is it video? Is it in person? What does it look like? Just to give people a sense of comfort with the approach that you are using and the tools that you're using in order to evaluate them. And an assessment should be a part of that. I had a client a couple of years back who had gotten to a place where she was one of two candidates, the final two candidates. And I don't know if they decided at the last minute to spring an assessment on them, or if it had already been a part of the process that they hadn't communicated. But when they got to the final two, all of a sudden there was this assessment. It was some sort of psychological assessment. And then they had a 2-hour debrief with the psychologist after they did this, really extensive, whatever it
Sounds
was.
like a government
And
job.
it wasn't.
It
It
wasn't?
wasn't. No, it was a communications job.
Hmm.
So I don't
Yeah.
know, right? But part of what they were trying to assess was leadership and decision making, and which was fine. But to not tell someone, and you get them all the way down to they're the last two candidates, and you're saying you're having trouble deciding, which is why I think they did it, right? They couldn't decide between the two candidates, and then I guess decided, well, if we use this assessment, it'll tell us something that we don't know, because they didn't want to make the wrong decision, right? Which is understandable. You don't want to make a wrong decision. However, it dragged the process out unnecessarily, another 4 to 6 weeks, at the point at which she was finding out that she found out that she was one of the final two candidates. So, right, in the real world, you could lose a quality candidate by doing something like that. And so just you want to be intentional about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and being open, honest, and transparent so that you don't miss out on a quality candidate.
Yeah, you want to be as transparent as you can be for a couple of reasons. A, you want those folks to have all the information so they can prepare. And the other, and we mentioned this in the last episode, you want people to be comfortable when they take it, unless the job is one of, unless they're, you know, um,
Unless you don't want them to be comfortable,
unless you,
right?
well,
But because that's the nature of the job.
right, unless the
Yeah.
job is, yeah, nuclear regulatory, air traffic controller, yeah, something like that. I get that, but I'm always shocked when I hear people have these really stringent onboarding or interviewing process when the job is basically going to be them sitting there, a bureaucratic job with paper, watching paint dry. I don't understand that. And the other reason why you want to do that is because, and this is a pro tip here, if you have an unqualified candidate, if you allow them to relax, they're going to let it all hang out, and you're going to find out stuff and hear stuff that will make your decision even easier. There are some things that I can't even mention on the show that I've experienced doing that. Whitney, I will tell you about it after we finish this episode. But there was a situation where I was interviewing somebody, and they were so relaxed. They were saying things that I was, quite frankly, I was shocked. I was like, I was shocked that they were actually not filtering what they were saying. And of course, they did not get the job. But you don't, but on the other hand, there were situations where the same approach allowed people to be relaxed, and they did extremely well
Yeah.
because it was more in line with the environment that they were going to be actually working in. And that's very key. It should be pretty much like the environment that they're going to be involved in if they actually get the job, if you can do that.
Right. Right. You remind me of, and I don't know if I've shared this story here before, or even with you, but I was interviewing for a position, and I won't say where, because I think the person who interviewed me is still there.
Okay.
But I was interviewing for a position, and there were two people. So I guess that's a panel. It wasn't a solo interviewer, but there were two people. We were sitting in a pretty closed office, probably, I don't know, maybe 8 by 8, had a desk, couple of chairs. One of the chairs had to be brought in. It was that tight. So
Right.
big enough for a desk and someone to come in. And so there were the three of us in the office, and I thought the interview was going relatively well. And all of a sudden, the main interviewer, with his shoes off, put his feet up on the desk right in front of me. And I wasn't sure if it was a test of some sort.
Was it a smell test? Doesn't pass the sniff test. I'm sorry. I
I
couldn't let
wasn't sure if it, and I was think as I was sitting there, I was thinking maybe this is to see how I perform under pressure, right? Because the job would have been it wouldn't have been that kind of pressure, but there would have been things that would have happened where people were throwing stuff at me in the job, just randomly. And he just wanted to see if I would be flustered if someone did something unexpected. um and so I sat there, uh didn't say a thing, just but I will say this: I knew in that moment that was not some place I wanted to work.
Absolutely.
And so, while most of our comments here have been directed towards the hiring manager and the interviewers, it in reality, what we're saying applies if you're applying for a job, right? Paying attention to the things that we're suggesting that are helpful for the organization that's hiring, right? See how you can extract that information to see how it applies to you. And so, something about assessments, if someone is um, presenting an assessment and you think the goal is to stump you up, to keep you on edge, or do they take the time to make you feel comfortable? That can tell you something about the culture and whether or not you actually want to work there. Have they been open and transparent about the process? And if they're not, maybe, right, it doesn't say definitively that the culture is not that, but you want to pay attention to the signs, is the way I would couch that. I did not continue with the process. After we were done, I sent a thank you and said, I've decided that I'm going to move in a different direction. So
Well,
I
I think it's so important to realize that while and we sometimes forget this because we're talking about it from the employer side of it, but
yes.
you're also, as the employee or potential employee, you're also interviewing them.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, here's the thing: when you're interviewing, and this was something that we took for a given. You should be, when you're interviewing, when you're the interviewer, I should say, you should be on your best professional behavior.
Yeah.
Kicking your shoes off and putting your feet up while you're interviewing somebody, that's not professional. And
It is not.
but the good part is, and we talk about this on the show, that gives you a glimpse into, quite possibly, I don't want to make a generalization, into the culture of the organization. And
Absolutely.
if you're the kind of person, this is kind of horrifying because you're a lawyer. And I'm just thinking, wow, first of all,
As was the interviewer.
exactly, right? So first of all, wow. Wouldn't want to work with that person in any legal capacity. Uh, if they're that lax, when that's anyway, it's like, that's a shocker. I'm gonna see if I can one up you when the show's over, because I can't talk about my my experience here because it's R-rated. Um, so you want to be on your best behavior. You certainly want that person to be comfortable that you're interviewing, but you don't want to do something that's going to compromise your professional, the way they view you as a professional, or the organization.
Right.
But as the interviewee, that could be just a slice of what that culture maybe. And I think that's how you took it. And you were like, you know what? This is probably telling me something about the culture. I don't want to be involved in this organization because if they're handling this very important process this way, this may give me a glimpse of how they handle other
Yeah.
more important processes. So that's
And
really interesting.
and certainly if it wasn't about the culture overall, it was certainly about that person, and I did not want to work for him,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely,
And so it maybe it wasn't a telltale sign about the overall,
right.
but I hazard to guess since I ended up working in that arena and saw it, it was very much, it was not a place for me. So, and that's all I needed to know, right?
And
As
let
an
me,
interviewer, and maybe he learned what he, maybe it was intentional, and he learned what he needed to learn about me, which was I'm, and maybe I failed the test. I'll never know because I withdrew my candidacy, but maybe I failed the test, which was not to call somebody out on something, because it was very much a working environment where sometimes people needed to be put in their place. And so, I share the story. As I was saying, you can create your your own test and assessment, but be careful. Just
yeah,
be
that's the
careful
that's
about
the
what it is you do.
and here's the crazy part about that, or maybe not. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you've crossed paths with this person again after that. See, so there you
Yes.
go. So
Yeah.
that's something else. And I learned about that when I was in the music industry. I had a really good manager and producer, and they were like, "Look, you may think this industry is really big. It's really not. So if you don't get a gig or if you don't get a deal with this company or with this person, don't be professional because that person can easily leave that firm and go someplace else, and then you go shopping to that firm, and that because that happened to my manager, uh, and that person was behind an even higher in a higher position in another organization. Needless to say, she did not get the deal that she was looking for because of her bad behavior, and that was a lesson that was imparted to me
Yeah.
when I was very young. And you certainly want to take that, and apply it when you're interviewing people, when you're even just maneuvering as a professional. You want to be very careful, which is why my business is my name. It's a check for me to make sure that I am behaving properly and not
You
just,
are your brand.
yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. You want to make sure
Yeah.
that I'm behaving properly and professionally because it will follow you.
That is very true. Cool. All right. So, before we jump into a discussion about some other mistakes that you don't want to make, since we just got into that a little bit, let's talk about and you let me do this. We had slides and everything, and you
Oh
just
well,
let you let
I
you
think
let me go.
I take full responsibility with it.
it's, it's not your fault. Um, so anyway, we talked about the assessments, right? And the purpose of them and using them as a tool to further assess your candidates, basically. And you can test all kinds of things as we've talked about here. So use them as a tool, don't use them as a crutch, sort of the bottom line. The next is about background checks and reference checks. I bet you had some fun doing that in your past work.
That was one thing that I didn't do, and
No?
we hired a company to do that for us.
Okay.
But I do have a story that's hair raising. There was a yeah, and I'll let you start this segment, and then I'll segue with my hair raising story.
So, there are a number of reasons that you want to conduct background checks. There are some legal reasons that you'll want to do this, protect the organization. But for the most part, you want to make sure that you are verifying what the candidate has said about their past performance, about their work habits, reliability, history, etc., right? That their skills are what they say they are. I hazard to guess that more than one candidate in the history of life has stretched the bounds of credulity about about who they are and what they can do. And so you want to make sure that you do the reference checks, right, with the prior employers. If you ask for references outside of past employers, personal references, professional references, that you don't just ask for them and then never call. And it's one of those things that I have seen people will ask for them. They feel like, well, if I get them, they're people are going to say nice things about the candidate because these are the references they provided. One, that's not always true. And I'm always shocked and amazed when someone uses a reference who doesn't have nice things to say about them. So I don't know if that's a self-awareness thing or what that's about, but the references don't always have nice things to say. So you should be calling and having those discussions. The on the There's a legal aspect of this that can get in the way sometimes of some honesty and transparency of what a company will say for a reference check for a former employer, a former employee. Sometimes they will only give you like basics. Yes, they worked here. Here were the dates. Here was their salary. Yes or no, we would not hire them back, right? This sort of like, here are the facts, and we're only going to give this little bit because they run the risk of, if they say something negative, and it results in someone not getting a job, litigation concerns, right? So often when a reference check is run, you don't get a lot of information because of fear of that. But if you ask the right kinds of questions, right, you can get it, just like the questions that you ask in the interview. If you ask the right kinds of questions, you can get people to open up and say a little more. And if you can get beyond HR and to someone they've actually worked with, that's a better way to go. The other part of this is the actual background checks, running criminal background checks, credit histories, etc. You want to get information that's relevant again to the nature of the job that the person is doing. So if someone is in charge of money, and has access to money, or they're around children, you want to make sure you're running background checks, criminal background checks, to find out if there's anything in their past that would preclude them, right? That would make sense for them not to be involved in certain kinds of jobs and activities. So it's important to run those. If you're going to run background checks, there are some legal processes that need to be followed. If you're a hiring manager, chances are HR will handle this. Isn't really your thing, but you should know that you should not be running background checks without written consent from your candidates. All right. You need to have written consent from your candidates. There's a whole process and a line of, there's the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That is a federal law. It applies to the request of background checks that are provided by third party, basically vendors, but the organizations that are in the business of providing those background checks, credit reporting agencies, DOJ, police departments, etc. And if you don't follow the rules of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the mandates in that act, you can subject your company to high uh, uh,
Penalty.
legal liability and huge monetary damages.
Mhm.
So you want to be careful. You should not have anyone on your team that doesn't know what they're doing in this respect, running those background checks.
Yeah, which brings up another point, especially for the entrepreneurs that may be listening to our program. You should have a really solid legal representative that you work with when you're doing things like this, so to make sure that you're doing things that are above board and legal. That's really important. The other thing I want to bring up is when you're doing reference checks, and you're exactly right. And I think it's a self-awareness issue. Some people will put people down for their references that really don't say very nice things about them. And I remember we were hiring in a previous job, we were hiring for a very high position in this organization. And this candidate, we had been really searching for a while and narrowed it down to a couple candidates. And this person provided some references. Not one of those references gave a favorable opinion of this person and their previous work. That's not the astonishing part. The astonishing part was the CEO decided to hire this person anyway. And it was like, well, why are we doing this if you're not even going to look at this? These references, these were people that this person provided, and they were not, really putting this person in a favorable light. The person was hired, and guess how it worked out? Did not
I
work
don't
out.
think I have to get. I don't think I
It
have
did
to.
not work out very well.
I imagine not.
Everything that those folks said that this person was, or how they worked in the past, was right there, front and center. Did not collaborate well with others. Was a micromanager to the point where I'm surprised this person did not go home with people. It was that bad. It was that I've never seen someone micromanage like this before. Really, really liked busy work and giving. The more complicated something was, the better it was. It was just not,
Mm,
and it was to the point where, and I'm not even exaggerating. This person had people crying. I'm talking about seasoned managers, both men and women, in
wow.
tears, begging to be removed from this person's team. But it was unbelievable to me. Like, this is you got the information. We did our due diligence, and we were vetoed. And so that's something else. You need to have some, the checks and balances are good, but you really need to have a process that you're willing to stick to if you're hiring, especially for sensitive positions. And you need to, no matter how desperate you may be, you need to be able to stick to your guns, because if you're doing your due diligence and you have these processes in place and they are working and they have worked for you in the past, you have to let them do the work for you. Don't just use your gut instinct, or, this guy looks like he's a great golfer, so I want to go ahead and hire him. We could have some great, whatever that CEO's criteria was. I don't know what it was, because I didn't even want to speak to him about that, because it was just such a polarizing type of situation. So really, when you put your process in place, vet it out, get legal involved. um, you can test it to make sure it's work, and if it's working for you, stick with it. Try not to deviate unless there's an extreme case, and this was not, where you might want to deviate from it.
So I want to add this legal point to what you just said, which is, so you guys ran this background check, reference check, and it doesn't matter, either or both.
Both.
But particularly a criminal background check, and I just want to put this fine point on this. If You have information, and generally, this is going to be around maybe someone with a violent past, maybe some sort of sexual predator past, right? They're on a list or what have you. Um, and you hire them and they harm someone physically, emotionally, etc., right? They do some harm to someone, whether an employee, customer, client, constituent, whatever. And there's a standard that you knew or should have known that this person was a danger to others, and you hired them anyway, or slightly aside, you keep them in your employ, right? In a different context, you again open yourself up to liability. So Robert's point about keeping legal in this is hugely important, and you don't want to ignore red flags,
No.
right? Do not ignore the red flags. Otherwise, you might as well not do the run the reference checks and the background checks. If you're going to ignore them, you might as well save the money and time and just hire people, which neither of us advocates for.
No, no, no. Um, I'm a fairly cautious person, as you know. But there have been times where I have not heeded my own frameworks or my own gut, intuition, whatever. That's why it's really important to have some checks in place. So if that happens, you can make sure that you're doing the right thing. You have that framework in place that's going to keep you in your lane and not deciding that you're going to do something different than what you put down before. You put those things in place for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And certainly if you're going to go against it, you need to have some really good justification, particularly if ultimately it can land you into some legal trouble. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, one friend to another, that's not legal advice. So just
But
saying.
you are a lawyer, so
I am a lawyer, but it's not legal advice.
that's true.
It's just one friend to another. We're just having a conversation.
That's right. That's right.
So, what are some mistakes to avoid? Well, the obvious ones are the ones that are counter to the points that we gave you about what to do, right? So we talked about the importance of having clear job descriptions. So if you don't have a clear job description, that's a mistake, right? We talked about bias in the hiring process and overemphasis on qualification. So those are things, again, the things that we said, these are things that you want to do. Not doing those are mistakes. But there are some additional mistakes that we want to point out. And so, rushing hiring decisions, right? As well as taking too long to make hiring decisions. You don't want to rush hiring decisions. You want to get all the information, right? Or as much information as you can about the candidate so you can make an informed decision, and one that brings someone on board who's in alignment with your company's values and your goals and the needs that you have to fulfill a particular position, right? Want to you want to have the information you need to do that. So you want to not rush the decision, meaning you need to get the information that you need in order to do that. On the backside of that, you should not be taking 6 months to hire somebody, right? And I have seen situations where a position, and it's not some high, somewhere high in the hierarchy of an organization or some high security, a secret service type job where you have to run like super deep background checks and the off the dark web or something like that,
Not
that requires more time, right? So it should not takes so long that you start losing people in your candidate pool. So there's a sweet spot in there, and it's about having enough information to make an informed decision, but not being so cautious, so scared of making a mistake that you keep going back to the well over and over again. And I was talking with someone in a training class I was doing week before last. It was a class on hiring, and one of the trainees was saying that they had an opportunity where the hiring manager had a really good candidate, but he didn't want to pull the trigger because of grass is greener syndrome, right? He kept, well, what if there's someone better, right? This person, it wasn't like he didn't have a qualified person. It was, what if there's someone better? And you've got to get to a place where if someone checks your boxes, right, that you delay hiring because you're concerned that there's someone better.
I almost said, you hear that, single people out there? No, I'm joking. But it's true, right? We do this in a lot of different aspects of our lives. But
Yes.
when you're hiring, that person checks your boxes. That person's almost perfect. There's no perfection out there. Have your I don't want to say minimum requirement, but your gateway requirement. They come through that threshold. Maybe there's two, but if this one is the first in a long time, you may have to wait an inordinate amount of time before somebody comes along that checks those boxes. And I'm guessing the punchline to your story is that they passed on this person and had to wait like 9 years before they got somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It came back to bite them. Yeah. I don't know about 9 years, but certainly, that candidate is now gone because they're a quality candidate. Someone else hires them, and then here you are back to the drawing board because you're looking for a unicorn. Yeah. Right. And so you don't need a unicorn. Here's the challenge that often happens, right? You want to replace the person who left with the person who left, forgetting that the person who left is not the person that was hired, right? The person that was hired became the person who left, that you have up here on a pedestal. And so trying to replace that person with that same person doesn't make sense, because you have that person and they left, probably for opportunities to grow and whatever. And so if you replace them with someone who came exactly where they are, right, that person's probably going to be looking for other opportunities too. So exactly. you need to be really careful about that. So rushed hiring and delayed hiring, and finding the sweet spot of, do I have enough information, and does this person have enough of what we're looking for to bring them on? True, you don't want to make a bad decision, right? Because hiring and replacing and recruiting, all of this is expensive, right? Training and all of that. But it's not about you finding the perfect person. You're going to, with investment, development, training, coaching, mentoring, are going to take the person that you hire and make them as perfect as you're going to get them to be.
I love the quotes there, because nothing's perfect, right? And we sometimes trick ourselves into thinking that there's something perfect out there, and there really isn't. We can look for excellence, we can demand excellence, we can appreciate excellence, we can look for excellence, but there is no perfection. And sometimes we get caught up with that, and that sometimes is, what do they say? I can't remember, but great is the enemy of good, or something like that. You want to.
Perfection is the enemy of good.
Yeah, you don't want that. You look for somebody who, like you said, checks the boxes, and someone who can grow into that. There is no person, I don't know of anybody that went into an organization and they were fully baked culturally wise. They came in there, they fit the culture perfect. That just doesn't happen. So you want to get somebody in there who's adaptable, who's smart enough to learn, and who has a good track record. So once you get in there, they can get acclimated to the culture, acclimated to the work style of the people they're going to be interacting with. And I think that's what we sometimes forget. We're looking for that perfect person, and that they don't exist.
Right. Absolutely. Um, the next one is lack of feedback and follow up, right? Providing feedback, getting, there's feedback in a couple of different ways. Feedback on your process. So that's internal feedback. And then you can get feedback from your candidates. Once they come on board, you hire them, learn something about the process, right? What worked well in the process? What didn't work well? And then this concept of follow up, whether you end up hiring someone or not, let them know that you've made the decision to move forward with another candidate.
Yeah.
Right? Don't leave them hanging out there. That can be a huge brand issue. It could be that it would narrow down to a couple of really great candidates. You chose over the other, right? You don't notify the one that you didn't hire. You bring the other one on. You could have gone either way, right? It could have gone either way. The next time there's an opportunity in your organization, right? Now they know something about your culture, or they think they know something about your culture because you're not in the habit of following up. And so they hold that against you. And then you lose out on opportunity for a quality candidate for some other job, or this same job down the line when the person you hired over them, it didn't work out, right? So just feedback and follow up, because it's about continuous improvement. You want to be continuously improving your hiring process.
I don't even have anything to add to that. That's perfectly said.
Awesome. And then the final one, a mistake to avoid is not involving the team, right? Not involving other members of the team. And that doesn't mean that you have to have a panel interview with everyone on the team on it. But when you are discussing, once you've finished your post interview evaluations with whoever is a part of that, the panel that's a part of that, and you're moving people forward, talk about who's on the table, who you're considering, what they're bringing to the table. Get some input from other members of your team about how they think people will fit in or don't fit in. And something that I like as a part of the process, if you can work it in, particularly when you get down to the last two candidates, or you have the person that you've decided that you think you want to hire and you're going to make an offer to, right? Maybe have a lunch or coffee with that person, with the team. See if what the vibe is, if people will get along, if because that's another opportunity to see how people with their guard down, how they will act and respond. And I will say uh, all the people that I have had those opportunities with, candidates that have had those opportunities with when we ultimately hired them, turned out to be really good fits and employees. And the ones that didn't happen to, sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't, right? Because there wasn't an opportunity for everyone to have, some sort of a say. One, getting to know that person and providing some different perspectives that are different from, right, yours as the hiring manager or as the entrepreneur. And so you can do, as an entrepreneur, you can do that with a group of others, right? If you don't, if maybe it's your first hire, and have a couple of people that you consider advisors that can provide some extra perspective and insight on somebody that maybe you don't see yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even if it's just, even if you don't, if they're not even there physically and you just report into that person, just to get a feel for, what do you think? I saw this thing. What's your idea about this? Just like you said, that extra perspective can really be helpful.
Awesome. So with that, we made it to the end. We
Yeah,
made it to the end of our list.
absolutely.
And so, right there are benefits to taking the time to really think about what it is you're doing, what your hiring plan is, what your strategy is, and how you're implementing it, and making sure that you are clear about what you're doing, why you're doing it, each step of the process, and recognizing that when you are bringing new employees on, that this is you investing in the future. So, Robert had to step off. So I will start with me. Normally, I ask Robert, if someone wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that? I'm going to tell you, if you would like to get in touch with me, the way you can do that is to reach out to me at shiftingintoaction.now.site. Shiftingintoaction.now.site. I'm going to take this off of here. It's on the crawl at the bottom of the screen. And if there are a couple of ebooks there, they are my gift to you. If you'd like to schedule an appointment, there is a form that you can complete for a strategy session. Let's talk. And Robert, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
They can reach out to me at inspireme at roberthilliardcoaching.com, or you can just go to Robert Hilliard Coaching and fill out that contact form. They'll let me know what goals or challenges you have or are experiencing. We can set up a discovery call. We can talk about some things and figure out how I can help you, or if I'm the coach for you.
Absolutely. So, and if you'd like to be a guest on the show, we are having guests on that we're interviewing. If you are doing something interesting in leadership or with your leadership and you want to share, reach out, let us know. We are talking to people who are leading sometimes in really novel ways. We've got one of those coming up, and we'll talk more about that when the time is nearer. But you're interested in being on the show, or you have an idea or a topic for a show, reach out, let us know. So until then, Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, right here on LinkedIn, YouTube. If you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when we go live, or on Facebook. And until next time, take care.
Bye now.